The storm raged that night, shrouding everything in darkness except for the small pool of light cast by the candle on my desk. I sat by the window, peering out into the chaos. Thunder boomed relentlessly, and occasional lightning illuminated my garden with eerie brilliance. My home was far off the grid, isolated from the city, nestled on the outskirts near a dense, foreboding forest. I was growing restless at my desk. My entire house was engulfed in darkness, and being alone, there was no one to keep me company. With no Wi-Fi, my only option was to read, though it was far from my favorite pastime. Reluctantly, I decided to grab a book. Just as I rose from my chair, I heard a soft, sweet humming, a girl's voice, probably a teenager. Despite the storm's roar and the pounding rain, her voice was clear as crystal. Curious, I peered out the window. At first, I couldn't see anything, but then a flash of lightning illuminated the scene, revealing not a teenage girl, but a woman standing a few feet away from my window. She had blue eyes, pale white skin, a sweet face, and an oddly wide smile. She wore a beautiful wedding dress that, despite the downpour, looked eerily dry. I asked her, "Hello? Do you need any help?" Her humming stopped and her smile faded into a blank expression. After a moment, what happened next left me horrified. Her beautiful blue eyes rolled back into voids, and her face slowly contorted, widening to reveal sharp teeth. She let out a monstrous scream, almost deafening, and charged toward my window. Just as she was about to reach it, another flash of lightning struck and she vanished almost instantly. I shot back from the window, pulling the curtain closed. I thought it was safe now, but I couldn't have been more wrong. I heard a loud bang downstairs, the sound of something breaking. My breath caught in my throat. I wasn't going to take any chances. Quickly, I reached under my desk and pulled out the shotgun, fitted with a torch and loaded with a few shells. It was a 16 gauge, easily capable of blowing someone's head off, but was that thing even real? Or just a hallucination? Am I paranoid? If it was all in my head, then what caused the noise downstairs? I am going nuts. Slowly, I made my way down the darkened hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. The storm's fury outside mirrored the tempest of fear within me. Each step felt like an eternity, the creaking floorboards betraying my presence. I reached the top of the staircase and peered down into the inky blackness below. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional rumble of thunder and the persistent drumming of rain against the roof. I flipped the torch on, the beam slicing through the darkness. I descended the stairs, the shotgun clutched tightly in my hands, my fingers trembling on the trigger. The house was eerily silent now, as if holding its breath. I reached the bottom and slowly scanned the living room, the torchlight dancing over familiar furniture that now seemed ominous and alien in the darkness. The broken glass crunched underfoot as I stepped into the room. My gaze fell upon the shattered window, rainwater pooling on the floor beneath it. I swept the beam of light across the room, but there was no sign of the intruder. My mind raced, every shadow and flicker of light a potential threat. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. I whipped around, the torch illuminating a figure standing in the doorway. It was the woman from outside, her wedding dress now drenched and clinging to her body, but still strangely pristine. Her wide smile had returned, but her eyes remained voids of darkness. She stepped forward and I raised the shotgun, my hands shaking uncontrollably. "Stay back!" I shouted, my voice cracking with fear. She continued to advance, her movements slow and deliberate, as if savoring my terror. The beam of light flickered, casting eerie shadows on her face, highlighting the unnatural sharpness of her teeth. "Please," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the storm's roar. "Please don't come any closer." She stopped, tilting her head to one side, her smile widening even further. Her eyes, or what remained of them, seemed to bore into my soul, filling me with a profound sense of dread. I took a step back, my mind racing for a way out, but my body felt paralyzed with fear. Suddenly, she lunged at me, faster than I could react. I fired the shotgun, the deafening blast echoing through the house. The light from the torch flared, blinding me momentarily. When my vision cleared, she was gone. I stood there panting, the acrid smell of gunpowder filling the air. The storm outside seemed to quieten, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I lowered the shotgun, my hands still trembling. Had I imagined it all? The broken window, the woman's horrifying visage, the fear that had gripped me so tightly. It all seemed like a nightmare. But the broken glass and the lingering scent of gunpowder told me it was real. Took a deep breath and turned to head back upstairs, my legs feeling like lead. As I reached the staircase, I heard a soft, sweet humming once more. My blood ran cold. I turned slowly, the beam of the torch flickering in the darkness. There, standing at the bottom of the stairs, was the woman, her smile more malevolent than ever. I raised the shotgun again, but before I could react, she lunged at me, her face twisting into a mask of rage. The last thing I saw was her eyes, those empty voids, before everything went black. It was too late to do anything. I was paralyzed with fear, my breath hitching as the creature stared down at me with its unnerving smile. In that moment, I knew it was over for me. The storm outside was nothing compared to the terror that had found its way into my home. As the darkness closed in, I realized there was no escape. My fate was sealed. However, it wasn't the end. I opened my eyes to the soft golden light of morning streaming through the windows. The storm had passed, leaving behind a serene and peaceful atmosphere. I was still in one piece, lying on the staircase where I'd collapsed. Shards of broken glass littered the floor, glinting in the morning sun, and the shotgun lay beside me, its barrel cold and silent. I picked up the shotgun, my fingers brushing against the cold metal. Despite the calm of the morning, a lingering sense of unease gnawed at me. I knew whatever had visited me last night was not human. No human could take 2 16-gauge shotgun rounds to the face and simply vanish. I loaded some extra rounds into my pocket and began to search my house, determined to ensure that the creature was truly gone. I started with the living room where the confrontation had taken place. The window was shattered, glass scattered across the floor, and the rainwater had soaked into the carpet, leaving dark, damp patches. The air still carried the faint smell of gunpowder and rain. I examined the walls and furniture, looking for any signs of the creature. There were deep, jagged scratches on the window frame, as if made by sharp claws. The mark sent a shiver down my spine, but there was no sign of the creature itself. I moved through the rest of the house, my shotgun at the ready. I checked the attic, peering into the dark corners and dusty boxes, but found nothing unusual. The basement was next, its damp, musty smell filling my nostrils as I descended the creaky stairs. I swept the flashlight's beam across the room, illuminating the old shelves and cobweb-covered corners. Nothing. I went through each room, one by one, my tension easing slightly with each empty space. Finally, I returned to the living room, my mind racing with questions. What had that creature been? Why had it targeted me? And more importantly, was it gone for good? The morning light seemed to banish the lingering shadows of the night, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. I looked at the marks left by the creature on the window frame. They were deep and uneven, as if it had clawed its way into my home with inhuman strength. The thought made my skin crawl. I knew I had to find out more about what had happened, to understand what I was dealing with. With the storm gone and the morning sun providing a semblance of safety, I decided to reach out to someone who might help. The local authorities wouldn't believe a word of this, but perhaps someone with knowledge of the paranormal or the strange might. I grabbed my phone and began searching for contact information, hoping to find someone who could provide answers. As I waited for a response, I glanced around my living room once more. The broken glass, the claw marks, and the lingering fear were stark reminders of the terror that had invaded my home. I knew this was just the beginning, and whatever had come for me last night would be back. I stopped scrolling through the contacts and laughed at myself. What the fuck am I even doing? In this modern era, Who in their right mind would believe such a thing? But whatever happened to me was 100% real. Either I was tripping, or it was true. The thought of someone actually believing my story seemed ludicrous. Ghosts, monsters, creatures from nightmares. Those were the stuff of fiction, not reality. Yet, the broken glass, the claw marks, and the lingering fear were all too real. I couldn't dismiss it as a mere hallucination. I took a deep breath and decided to document everything. If I couldn't convince others, at least I could have a record for myself. I grabbed a notebook and started writing down every detail I could remember about the night before. The woman's appearance, the storm, her transformation, the attack. Every fragment of the memory was etched into my mind. As I wrote, I heard a faint, almost imperceptible noise coming from outside. My heart skipped a beat. I stood up and moved cautiously toward the window, my grip tightening on the shotgun. The morning sun cast long shadows across the garden, and for a moment, everything seemed peaceful. But then I saw it, movement near the edge of the dense forest. I squinted, trying to make out what it was. A figure, half hidden among the trees, watched me. My breath caught in my throat as the figure stepped forward, coming into the light. It was a man, or at least it appeared to be. His clothes were tattered, and his eyes had the same unsettling emptiness I had seen in the woman's eyes the previous night. "Hey!" I called out, my voice shaking slightly. "Who are you? What do you want?" The man didn't respond. Instead, he turned and disappeared back into the shadows of the forest. My pulse raced, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I knew I had to get out of here, to find help, but where could I go? I grabbed a backpack and started packing essentials: food, water, ammunition, and a few basic supplies. As I did, I kept glancing out the window, half expecting the man to reappear. The unease gnawed at me, growing stronger with each passing minute. With my backpack slung over one shoulder and the shotgun in hand, I stepped out of the house. The fresh morning air was a stark contrast to the oppressive atmosphere inside. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves. I had to find answers, and I had to stay alive. I started walking towards the nearest town, hoping to find someone who could help me understand what had happened. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, fear and determination. Whatever that creature was, whatever it wanted, I knew one thing for certain. It wasn't over. The battle had just begun. While I was walking down the sole road connecting the 5 towns ahead, a wholesome farmer offered me a ride to the next town. Through small talk, I told him about the incident. Unlike others, he didn't laugh. Instead, his face turned serious and he asked,
"By any chance, are you the new tenant of that? That farmhouse that's secluded from town?"
"Yeah, I am. Why? Does something matter? Please tell me." The farmer pulled out his pack of cigarettes, offering me one and taking one himself. After lighting both, he started speaking in a thick country accent. The farmer pulled out his pack of cigarettes, offering me one and taking one himself. After lighting both, he started speaking in a thick country accent. Long time ago, when I was well in my mid-30s, there was an incident that took place there. A family lived there. They were hard-working farmers. The man and his wife and their 16 or 17-year-old son helped out a bit too. They also had a baby girl, just 5 months old. They were a really happy family. One day, while I was driving down this path, I saw the whole house on fire, with fire brigades desperately trying to control it. It was burnt to a crisp. The whole family was charred when they were pulled out after the fire had stopped. I still remember the day and the smell. He stopped abruptly and faced me. I never heard anything going wrong with previous tenants, although they always felt weird. "But what you're saying is quite extreme." I absorbed his words, feeling a chill run down my spine. "What happened to the family?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The official story was that it was an accident, he continued, exhaling a plume of smoke. A lamp supposedly tipped over in the middle of the night, but there were always rumors, whispers of something unnatural about that place. Some said they saw strange lights in the forest around the house. Others talked about eerie sounds at night, but nobody could ever prove anything. What do you think it was? I pressed, feeling a knot of fear tightening in my stomach. The farmer took a long drag from his cigarette, his eyes distant. I don't know, and I don't think I wanna. But if what you say is true, and you saw something, then maybe those old rumors weren't just stories. You need to be careful. If it's back, whatever it is, you need to find a way to protect yourself. We rode in silence for a few moments, the weight of his words pressing down on me. The road stretched ahead, and the morning sun cast long shadows across the landscape. I felt a mix of dread and determination. Whatever haunted that farmhouse, I had to uncover the truth and find a way to stop it. The farmer dropped me off at the edge of the next town, and as I thanked him, he grabbed my arm gently, looking me in the eyes. "Be careful," he said earnestly. "And if you need help, find someone who knows about these things. Don't face it alone." I nodded, grateful for his concern. As he drove away, I stood there for a moment, gathering my thoughts. The town ahead was my next step. I entered the town and made my way towards a small tavern. I sat down and ordered a dram of scotch and a hearty breakfast of eggs, bacon, sausage, black pudding, haggis, baked beans, tomatoes, mushrooms, and toast. The server looked at me and said,
"Hey, looking like you're about to cry. What is it, lad? A heartbreak at this time in the morning?"
"Oh, certainly not. You got the wrong idea," I replied.
Then there must be a reason for it. It's a small town, lad. Only friendly people here. Go on. I'm not gonna laugh at ya. I'm Kenny, by the way. Nice to meet ya.
I hesitated for a moment, then decided to take a chance. "Nice to meet you too, Kenny. I've just been through something unusual. You see, I recently moved into that old farmhouse on the outskirts of town, and last night I encountered something terrifying. I'm not sure if it was real or if I'm losing my mind." Kenny's expression turned serious.
The old farmhouse, eh? That place has quite a history. Folks around here have always said it's haunted, but most think it's just stories to scare the kids. What exactly happened?
I took a deep breath and recounted the events of the previous night. The storm, the woman in the wedding dress, the monstrous transformation, and the eerie disappearance. Kenny listened intently, his eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, he nodded slowly.
That's quite the tale, lad. If what you say is true, then you've got a real problem on your hands. But you're in the right place. This town's seen its fair share of strange things, and there are folks here who know a thing or two about dealing with the supernatural.
"Do you know anyone who could help me?" I asked, feeling a glimmer of hope. Kenny leaned in closer.
There's an old man named Angus. Lives on the edge of town, near the woods. He's a bit of a recluse, but he's got knowledge of things most people don't. If anyone can help you, it's him. Finish your breakfast and head over to his place. Tell him Kenny sent ya.
I thanked Kenny and dug into my breakfast, feeling a mix of fear and determination. As I ate, I couldn't help but glance around the tavern, wondering if anyone else had experienced the same terror. With every bite, I steeled myself for what lay ahead. As I was about to leave the tavern, Kenny called out to me.
"I didn't catch your name, lad."
I turned back, giving him a reassuring smile. "It's Hamilton. Daniel Hamilton." "Thanks for the help." Kenny nodded, giving me a knowing look.
Good luck, Daniel. Be careful out there.
With that, I left the tavern, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. The hearty breakfast had given me some strength, but the weight of the night's events still lingered heavily on my shoulders. I made my way through the small town, heading towards the edge where Angus's place was said to be. The town was quaint and quiet, with the morning sun casting a warm glow over the streets. The buildings were modest, and the people I passed gave me curious but friendly glances. I followed Kenny's directions, soon finding myself on a path leading towards the woods. As I walked, the forest loomed ahead, its dense canopy casting long shadows on the ground. I kept my eyes peeled for any signs of Angus's home. After a short while, I spotted a small, weathered house nestled near the edge of the woods. It was surrounded by an overgrown garden and looked like it hadn't seen much upkeep in years. I approached the front door and knocked. The sound echoed in the quiet of the morning. After a moment, the door creaked open, revealing an elderly man with a long white beard and a weathered face. His eyes, sharp and alert, assessed me with a mix of curiosity and wariness.
"Can I help ye?"
he asked in a gruff but not unkind tone. "Mr. Angus?" I said, hoping I had the right person. "I'm Daniel Hamilton. Kenny from the tavern sent me. I need your help." Angus's expression softened slightly, though he still looked wary.
"Kenny, eh? Well, come on in then. Let's hear what's got ye all riled up."
I stepped inside, the musty smell of the old house enveloping me. As the door shut behind me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to delve deeper into something far beyond my understanding. I told Angus everything. The storm, the woman in the wedding dress, the monstrous transformation, and the terrifying scream. He listened intently, his eyes never leaving mine. After I finished, he looked towards the walls of his cluttered living room, filled with old books and strange artifacts.
"It's a banshee,"
he finally said. "Excuse me?" I asked, struggling to grasp what he was implying. Angus turned back to me, his face grave.
"It's a banshee, a spirit from Irish folklore, known for wailing or screaming to foretell death. What you described, the woman in the wedding dress, her transformation, and the monstrous scream, fits the description of a banshee."
I frowned, trying to piece together the information. But why would a banshee be haunting my farmhouse? What does it want? Angus stroked his beard thoughtfully.
Banshees are often tied to tragic events or deep emotional turmoil. The fire and the deaths of the family at your farmhouse likely created a powerful, lingering anguish. This anguish could have attracted or even created the banshee, turning it into a vengeful spirit. They feed on fear and sorrow, and their presence is a manifestation of the pain and hatred left behind.
So what can I do about it? I asked, feeling a growing sense of urgency. How do I get rid of it? Angus's eyes narrowed as he considered the question.
Dealing with a banshee requires addressing the source of its anguish. In your case, it's tied to the fire and the deaths of the family. You'll need to uncover more about what happened to them. Perhaps there are unresolved issues or unfinished business. Performing a ritual to put their spirits to rest or finding a way to appease their lingering anger might help. Additionally, banshees are sensitive to certain symbols and rituals that can ward them off or weaken their power.
He paused, looking at me with a serious expression.
You'll also need to be careful. Banshees can be dangerous, and their presence can lead to severe psychological distress or even physical harm. Gather as much information as you can about the family and the fire and seek out someone knowledgeable about ancient rites or protective symbols.
I nodded, feeling a mix of fear and determination. Thank you, Angus. I'll start by researching the history of the family and the fire. Any idea where I might find more information or anyone else who could help? Angus thought for a moment before answering.
Check with the local library or historical society. They might have records or old newspapers about the fire and the family. Also, talk to the older folks in town. They might remember more about the events or have heard stories. If you're looking for someone with knowledge of rites, you might want to visit the local church or seek out a spiritual practitioner who specializes in these matters.
With a clearer direction, I thanked Angus and left his home, feeling both relieved to have a lead and apprehensive about the task ahead. The journey to uncover the truth about the farmhouse, the banshee, and the tragic events that had given rise to it was far from over. As I was about to leave Angus's home, he stopped me.
Wait.
He said, reaching into a drawer and pulling out a small box. He handed it to me with a serious look.
Take these shotgun shells. I think they'll fit perfectly in your shotgun. In case the banshee shows up again, use these. They won't kill it, but they're designed to stun it long enough for you to escape. I only have 6 of them, and I don't have any more. Be careful with them.
I took the box, feeling the weight of his words as much as the weight of the shells. Thank you, Angus. I appreciate this. He nodded.
Just remember, these won't solve the problem permanently. They're only a temporary measure. Your best bet is to find out what's keeping the banshee bound to the place and deal with it.
I nodded, tucking the box safely into my bag. I'll be careful. Thanks for everything. With that, I left Angus's home and made my way back through the town. The box of special shells, a heavy reminder of the danger that still lay ahead. As I approached the edge of town, the reality of what I was facing began to sink in. The banshee, with its roots in the past and its malevolent presence in the present, was far from vanquished. I had a lot to uncover and a lot to prepare for. The local library and historical society were my next stops, and I hoped they would provide the answers I needed to put the banshee to rest. The journey ahead was uncertain, but with the shells in my possession and Angus's advice guiding me, I was determined to confront whatever awaited me at the farmhouse. For the next week, life settled into a mundane routine. Despite my efforts, nothing significant happened. I visited the church, hoping for some spiritual insight or guidance, but the priests were more focused on current parish matters and offered little more than generic advice. The local library proved similarly unhelpful. I pored over historical records and old newspapers, looking for any mention of the fire or the family that had lived in the farmhouse. While I found references to the fire itself, the details remained sparse, and there were no leads on why the banshee might be haunting the place. Talking to the older folks in town yielded only vague stories and local legends that didn't connect directly to the banshee or the events at the farmhouse. Most of their tales were about general hauntings and superstitions, rather than specifics about the tragedy that had occurred. By the end of the week, I felt a growing sense of frustration and helplessness. Despite my efforts, I hadn't found any concrete answers or solutions. The farmhouse loomed large in my mind, and the fear of encountering the banshee again remained a constant, nagging worry. One evening, as I sat in my temporary lodgings, the weight of the week's fruitless search pressing down on me, I reviewed my notes and the few scraps of information I had gathered. There had to be something I was missing, some small detail or clue that might have been overlooked. I decided to revisit the farmhouse the next day, hoping that a fresh perspective or a closer examination might reveal something new. It was time to confront the place again and see if I could find any further clues or connections that might explain the banshee's presence. The investigation was far from over, and as I prepared to return to the farmhouse, I knew that whatever I discovered next could be crucial in unraveling the mystery and facing the malevolent spirit that haunted my new home. I chose an equally stormy night to revisit the farmhouse, feeling the storm's fury match my own determination. Fully equipped with protective gear, an EMF reader, a radio, and my trusty shotgun, I approached the house. The storm raged around me, lightning flashing and thunder cracking, as if nature itself was warning me. The farmhouse looked the same as before, dark, foreboding, and seemingly unchanged. I entered with the same meticulous approach, checking every corner with the precision of someone who knew the gravity of what they faced. The wind howled outside, and the rain battered the windows, adding to the oppressive atmosphere. When I descended into the basement, a shiver ran down my spine, an instinctive warning that something was different. I swept my flashlight around the basement, scanning every shadow and corner. Amidst the clutter and dust, my gaze landed on a peculiar object. A pickle jar that appeared to be blackened and old. At first, I thought it was just another discarded item. But as soon as my hand touched it, a blood-curdling scream pierced the air behind me. My heart raced, and I spun around, shotgun raised. The banshee was there, its terrifying form charging at me with a speed that seemed almost unnatural. Its eyes burned with a fierce, unholy light, and its screams seemed to echo with the rage and sorrow of its existence. Without hesitation, I fired my shotgun point, blank at its head. The shot struck true, and the banshee's scream became a howl of pain and fury. It recoiled, its monstrous form writhing in agony before it turned and fled into the stormy night, disappearing into the tempest. I didn't have time to think. Clutching the jar tightly, I bolted out of the farmhouse. The storm battered me as I ran, the wind nearly knocking me off my feet and the rain drenching me to the bone. Behind me, the banshee's scream echoed, growing louder and more frantic, its presence closing in on me. With every step, I could feel the creature gaining on me, its howl blending with the roar of the storm. I pushed myself harder, adrenaline fueling my flight. The farmhouse loomed behind me, a dark silhouette against the flashing lightning. Finally, I reached the edge of the forest, where the trees offered a brief respite from the storm's fury. I ducked behind a large tree, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The MF reader in my hand crackled with static, indicating the banshee was still near, but its exact location was obscured by the storm and the dense foliage. I knew I couldn't stay here for long. The jar might hold the key to ending this nightmare, but I needed to analyze it further to understand its connection to the banshee. I had to find a safe place to examine the jar and figure out how to use it to put an end to the banshee's terror once and for all. As I crouched behind the tree, I could hear the banshee's screams fading slightly, but I was acutely aware that the danger was far from over. My next move had to be calculated and precise if I was to unravel the mystery of the jar, and finally rid the farmhouse of the vengeful spirit that haunted it. I carefully cracked open the jar, the lid coming off with a soft pop. Inside, I found an odd piece of writing etched into the jar itself, and a small, toy-like artifact. The artifact seemed ancient, with intricate designs and symbols carved into its surface. I quickly put everything back into the jar, securing it tightly before sprinting through the forest toward the town. The storm raged on, the downpour relentless, and the wind howling like a living thing. My fear of the banshee drove me forward, each crack of thunder and distant scream sending jolts of panic through me. The forest seemed endless, and despite my best efforts to navigate, I felt disoriented and exhausted. After what felt like an eternity of stumbling through the torrential rain, I finally emerged into the next town. I spotted Angus's house in the dim light of the storm, a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. I pounded on his door, my knuckles raw from the repeated knocks. Angus opened the door, his expression shifting from curiosity to alarm as he saw my drenched and disheveled state. He pulled me inside with a firm grip, shutting the door behind me and blocking out the storm's fury.
Quickly, what happened?
Angus asked, his voice filled with concern. I took a deep breath, recounting the events as succinctly as I could. The banshee came after me. I found this jar in the basement of the farmhouse. There was a piece of writing and a small artifact inside. I grabbed them and escaped, but the banshee was close behind me. I need your help. I handed the jar to Angus, who took it with a careful hand. He examined the jar closely, his brow furrowing as he read the writing. He then took out several old books from a nearby shelf, flipping through them with practiced speed. After a few tense moments, he looked up, his expression grave. This jar and the artifact are part of an ancient ritual. The runic letters are a binding spell. To break the Banshee's hold, we need to destroy the artifact before the storm calms and the sun comes out.
This jar and the artifact are part of an ancient ritual. The runic letters are a binding spell. To break the Banshee's hold, we need to destroy the artifact before the storm calms and the sun comes out.
I stared at him, processing the urgency in his words. What do we need to do? Angus moved quickly, gathering supplies from around his home.
We need to burn the artifact using the runic letters to sever its connection to the Banshee. We must do it before the storm subsides. The Banshee's power will diminish as the storm quiets, and the chance to destroy the artifact effectively will be lost if we don't act quickly.
He prepared a small fire in a metal bowl and placed it carefully on the table. With steady hands, he took the artifact from the jar and set it in the bowl. The runic letters began to glow faintly as he sprinkled a special mixture of herbs and salts over it. Just then, a shattering crash echoed through the room. My blood ran cold as the Banshee burst through the door, its terrifying form more furious than ever. Before I could react, it slammed Angus against a nearby tree with a force that sent a sickening thud through the storm. Angus knew who. I screamed, desperation clawing at my throat. The Banshee's gaze turned to me, its eyes burning with an intense fury. It seemed to curse in an unearthly language, its form writhing and shifting as it prepared to charge. I felt a surge of determination amid the fear. Angus had already poured gasoline over the artifact, and now it was my chance to end this nightmare. Ignoring the Banshee's relentless advance, I took aim with my shotgun. With a steady hand, I fired at the gasoline. Soaked remains. The blast ignited the gasoline, and the Banshee was instantly engulfed in a roaring inferno. Its monstrous form twisted and contorted in agonized screams, flames roaring from within its dark body. The air was filled with the stench of burning and the Banshee's wailing cries. As the flames consumed it, the Banshee's figure slowly turned to ash, its agonized screams fading into the storm. The once powerful spirit shrank and disintegrated, leaving nothing but dust. The storm outside began to wane, its fury diminishing as the Banshee's presence faded. The rain lightened to a drizzle and the clouds started to break apart. The first rays of morning sunlight pierced through the storm, casting a warm golden glow over the landscape. The nightmare was over. The oppressive, malevolent force had been vanquished, and the weather cleared, marking the end of the Banshee's reign of terror. I stood there, exhausted and battered, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow as I looked at the peaceful morning sky. The ordeal had taken its toll, and Angus's sacrifice was a heavy blow. As the sun rose higher and the world returned to normalcy, I took a deep breath, finding solace in the end of the nightmare, but knowing the memories of that night would linger long after the storm had passed. Shortly after the ordeal, the villagers and I gathered to honor Angus. His funeral was a somber affair, filled with the gratitude and mourning of those he had saved. Angus had become a hero, a beacon of hope in a time of darkness, and his sacrifice was remembered with deep respect. Years have since passed, and life in the village returned to a semblance of normalcy. Now, at 45 years old, I look back on those harrowing days with a mix of disbelief and unease. The farmhouse stands quiet, the storm's fury a distant memory. Yet, the experience remains vividly etched in my mind, a dark chapter that refuses to fade. No matter how hard I try to forget, the fear and trauma linger, an unsettling reminder of the terror we faced. To most, my story sounds like a figment of imagination or a ghost story whispered around campfires. I understand why they might doubt. It's easier to dismiss such things than to confront the reality of them. Despite the years that have passed, the shadows of that night still haunt me. I've tried to move on, to bury the past and live a normal life, but the experience left a permanent mark. The stormy nights, the Banshee's wails, and Angus's sacrifice are memories that refuse to be forgotten. In the quiet moments of my life, I find myself reflecting on those days, haunted by the echoes of a terror that once was. Though the storm has long since passed, the storm within me rages on, a reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the edge of our understanding.